We bring back I don't want to call him our record guest, Shane, but we have him on all the time. Matt Moreno, senior editor for GoAZCats.com. He's one of the most frequent guests we've had on the program, and he's one of the most informational because every time he's on, I feel like we learn so much new stuff. And so, Matt, I'm going to start off today and ask you, who the heck is Justin Kier, and why does he fit well with the Arizona Wildcats basketball plans?
Well, I'm going to drop some knowledge on you right off the bat. It's Justin Kier.
Kier.
So
Justin Kier.
Yeah. Justin Kier.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think he fits in pretty well with what they want to do. Obviously, when you look at kind of as a team what Arizona has on the perimeter right now, it's a lot of young players. Across the board, it's a lot of young players. And so you get a guy who's going to be around for one season. He's a graduate, a super senior, really. I mean, he was already a graduate transfer. And so he'll be adding to the mix. Someone who I think is an attacking guard, someone who can really do a lot of different things, fits in really well with Tommy Lloyd's style in terms of just being able to do a variety of things. A pretty good defender, became a better shooter this last season at Georgia, is someone who's going to attack the basket, can play a little bit of, a few different positions, probably is going to end up on the wing, but if they really need him to in a pinch, he could play the point guard spot. And so with no true kind of dedicated point guard at this point, they kind of have a few different options, a few different directions they could go with that position, and Justin Kier is someone who I think could help that as well.
So, Matt, I think Tommy Lloyd's done a good job adding some good role players, some depth on this team via the transfer portal. They were also locked in, apparently, on a pair of top 50 recruits, Ty Washington, Arthur Kaluma. They didn't get either of them. Is that a cause for concern, in your opinion, in terms of recruiting going forward, or no?
I could see how it could be. I don't think it's good. I mean, I think it's not the greatest way to start off, but they were also kind of behind the eight ball in a lot of ways. I mean, you're talking about trying to get recruits here in the last kind of 11th hour of the recruiting cycle. I mean, most prospects have already decided where they're going to go. They don't really know you at Arizona. Maybe some of these guys knew Tommy Lloyd from being at Gonzaga, but they don't know him at Arizona. And so they don't know what system he's going to run. They don't have a lot of time to kind of sell those types of prospects on what they're going to do. They have nothing to show for right now. He can only point to, what he did at another school. And so I think it's a difficult time for everything to kind of come into place to land, two top 50 guys. So I don't think it's as big of a concern as people think it is. I think if they didn't have Dylan Anderson already in the mix, who essentially committed the day after Tommy Lloyd was announced, a 4-star guy, an in-state prospect, someone who had offers to go to a lot of different places, a lot of high-level schools, might be more of a concern. But I think knowing that you have that guy that's going to be coming in next year, you have him already committed, that tells you a little bit about what Tommy Lloyd is going to be and what the staff can be as recruiters. And so I think moving forward, it'll just be about kind of building relationships. And so I don't think it's as big of a concern, but I don't think it's the greatest way to start off either. I think you're going to get those fans who are maybe on the fence, guys that people that didn't want to necessarily see Sean Miller go, who are kind of saying, well, you know what, this is why we didn't want Sean Miller to go. He could get recruits. And so I think to think that way is not appropriate right now. I think you have to let it play out a little bit, see where it goes from here. But I do think they're going to be very involved with, the next class and the 2022 class and looking ahead. And again, they already have somebody already committed for that class who's a pretty high-end talent. So I think things will even out, but it was a strange time to kind of go through a coaching change and you're at the end of, the recruiting cycle and you're trying to kind of plug some pieces in. And so I think it was just kind of two unfortunate recruitments. They happened to get involved with guys that, some other schools had the inside track on. And so you're trying to play catch up. And again, you don't really have anything to show at this point. If you're Tommy Lloyd at Arizona, you can only point to what you did before, but that's not necessarily everything that a recruit is looking for.
They have a couple of scholarship spots open for next season still. I think two left. How do you see them filling those, or are they going to fill those?
It'll be very interesting. I do think that they're going to be in play for some guys. I think the transfer portal is going to continue to kind of be somewhere where they live. There's not really much in terms of high school talent, at least American born. Obviously, this coaching staff can kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat in terms of international prospects. And so you never know who they have their eye on, outside of America and outside the US. So there's always a surprise or two that could end up coming through. But I think at this point, it's going to be about the transfer portal. Players have until July 1st to decide whether or not they're going to leave their school. So there's still some time before that moment arrives. And that will be if they want to be immediately eligible. The NCAA says they have until July 1st to decide and enter the transfer portal. So there's still some time to kind of build this roster. I don't think it will be a full roster this year. I think based on just kind of hearing some different things. Obviously, you have the NCAA issue kind of in the background. You don't know if that will eventually lead to some scholarship reductions, and you kind of want to be at least a little bit prepared for that. So I do think that you'll see Arizona be a little bit more kind of cautious with these next two scholarships, whether that's just hanging on to them for the next class and making sure they have enough room to kind of build this thing out in the future, or whether or not that's just kind of being cautious and really being selective with, who they decide to bring in. I don't know that you'll necessarily see them, add a couple more grad transfers. I think it's possible, but I think they kind of want to lean away from that. I think the situation would have to be right. I do think, this situation maybe calls for that, where you say you can just give those guys a scholarship for a year. If the reductions come, next year, you at least you don't have those guys locked in for longer than, just the season. But also, I think Tommy Lloyd wants to really know his players and really have a good relationship with them. And so that's hard to do when you're doing all of this kind of via phone. At least, obviously, the dead period will be coming to an end here soon, within the next week. So they can at least get some guys out on some visits if there are, those possibilities out there. But I think they're going to be a little more cautious. I don't know that I would necessarily expect them to fill both spots. I do think they'll probably add one more to the roster, but it remains to be seen who that will be and whether or not that will be a transfer, or if they find someone overseas, or maybe even uncover a high school prospect that no one has really maybe been talking about yet.
All right, so Matt, the big problem is right now at point guard, it's Kirk Kriisa, and then what? Right now, that seems like a major hole for Arizona, especially if they play a team, let's say a Syracuse, who will press the heck out of them.
Yeah, I think that's where you look at someone like Pelle Larsson from Utah. He did it a little bit last season as a freshman with the Utes. He played the point guard spot. I really do think, and I've talked to a few people and said, I think he could very well end up being their starting point guard. And it kind of raised a few eyebrows when I mentioned that to people. He's a 6'5" guy. He's a little bit taller. He's not necessarily someone you think of as being, a point guard at the college level, but he has a certain skill set that fits that position pretty well. He's a very good passer. And again, coaches like that length. They like to have those taller point guards. And so even though he isn't the perfect fit, he is capable of handling those duties. I do think it's going to look like more of a point guard by committee type of situation. I thought that before they even landed Pelle Larsson. That's nothing against Kirk Kriisa and his abilities. I think he is very capable of playing both positions, and you don't necessarily want to pigeonhole him into just playing the point guard spot, because he can shoot the ball well and you can play him off the ball and he can have some success. So I think based on kind of what we know about what Tommy Lloyd wants to bring to Arizona, what he did at Gonzaga, and what he was able to do just kind of with that system there, and looking at how they did things there, I think you'll see a pretty free-flowing system, a lot of movement, and a lot of players kind of being able to do a lot of different things. And so I don't think Arizona will be locked in on just having one guy playing, 35, 36 minutes at the point guard spot, like we saw this last season with James Akinjo, where he rarely came off the floor and, he always had the ball in his hand for the most part. I think you're going to see more of a point guard by committee type of situation at Arizona this season under Tommy Lloyd, until they can kind of find that guy that will be kind of their point guard of the future. But until that time, I think you'll see a lot of different guys. Dalen Terry is someone else who's ran the point guard position. Adama Ball, who's coming in from Paris, from France, incoming freshman, another taller guy, but he has that ball handling capabilities. This last season, he played the point guard for his team. So they do have some options. And I think you're going to see a lot of different guys kind of play that role for Arizona throughout the season. I don't think it's going to just fall on one person's shoulders.
All right, so I'm putting you on the spot with a basketball team because, when you're on the show, we have to put you on the spot. How good is this team as of right now? Are they an NCAA tournament team in your book?
I think they're comparable to last season's team, comparable, I should say. And I think it feels very similar. I think they've replaced kind of the players that they lost with pretty even, level of players, level of talent. I think the key is going to be the players who did return. Dalen Terry, I think, is someone that this coaching staff is very excited about, and his growth as a player in his second season. He didn't really get to showcase everything he could do last year, I don't think. And I think that the staff, it sounds like, is very excited about what he can do. They've had some different team workouts. Obviously, they don't have everybody on campus just yet, but they were able to have some workouts in the spring, and it sounds very positive from what they've seen from someone like Dalen Terry. And then you go back to Azuolas Tubelis, Ben Mathurin, and those are going to be your key guys this year. Those are going to be who you're relying on, game in and game out, to provide the scoring, to provide kind of everything for your team. And then you kind of fill in around them. Kirk Kreese, I think everyone believes he's going to take another step forward. Obviously, didn't get a chance to play for most of last season, came on at the end after he served whatever the suspension was or whatever the deal was with the NCAA when they made him sit out. When he returned, he was, obviously you're jumping in the middle of a season, really towards the tail end of a season when everybody has had, a ton of time to prepare and has played in games. And so I think for him, I think you expect him to make another step forward. And I think it'll be about that core group of players. Christian Coloco is another player who's now going into, his third season with this team, and it is someone who I think everyone expects to make another jump in his development as well. So I think you look at, the core group that Arizona has, and I think it's very similar. And I think that they're going to add, these new pieces in, and they'll kind of fit right in. I'd even mention Shane Noel, who's another kind of guy who could be a versatile player for this team, an incoming freshman who, he's been kind of quiet. No one really got to see what he was able to do during the high school season. Played on a different he didn't play, typical high school season. So not everybody got to see what he could do, and it'll be interesting to see what his development is like and what he's like when he arrives on campus. But I do like this team, and I do think it's very comparable to what they had last year. And I guess that's a long way of saying, yes, I do believe it's an NCAA tournament team.
Hopefully they will be eligible this coming season. That would be the big difference. In terms of football, just to pivot a little bit, Matt, I think Arizona's a few days away now, I believe, from being able to host recruits on campus again. And I know that Go AZ Cats had a chance to catch up with some Arizona targets at the Rivals camp in Southern California recently. You talk about some of the overall impressions that those targets had about the job that Jed Fish and his staff have done in terms of trying to bring them to Tucson and their level of effort in trying to rebuild that program through those potential recruits?
I think the overarching theme that I kind of felt and got the sense from talking to several different targets is that there's just intrigue there. There's just something about Arizona that they say, I want to check that place out. And I think everybody I talked to said they're either in the process of planning their official visit, working on figuring out when they want to visit Arizona, but none of them said, I'm not going. They all kind of want to go and see what Arizona is about and want to make it down to Tucson whenever they can. Some of them are more urgent about that and want to get it done, within the next couple of weeks, where some guys are saying, I'd rather wait till the fall, see what it looks like with, students on campus and fans in the stands and see what it looks like in a game environment. But I think there's a lot of intrigue with what Jed Fish and the staff is doing. That's part of the battle. The next part is getting them down to Tucson, and that's where kind of this visit process is going to be important for Arizona. They have, some big name guys that are planning to make it out to Arizona and see things in person, and that'll be their chance. They've obviously done a lot of their work already now, just kind of virtually, similar to what we're doing right now, where you can kind of just see, over video, over a webcam, kind of get a feel for someone. But it's much different when you get to see them in person, when you get to see a campus in person, get a feel for them, just, how they are. When you can, I know coaches always talk about this, when you can look a recruit in their eyes and kind of see what they're feeling face to face. And I think that's the same for recruits going the other way, learning about coaches. So I think the two things that I kind of took away were there's a lot of intrigue, a lot of interest, and recruits simply just want to see some places and take these visits and finally get a chance to really meet some coaches face to face.
Are there a couple of potential targets, like bigger names, that are have a realistic shot of possibly landing in Arizona that you could mention?
Yeah, I think one that continues to kind of come up is a linebacker out of Reno, Robbie Snelling. He's a very intriguing, interesting prospect. He's a 4-star linebacker, but he's also a high-level baseball player and someone who was once committed to Stanford for baseball and is going to play both sports wherever he ends up. He's planning to play baseball and he's planning to play football. High-level football player, high-level baseball player. He's going to take both things into consideration. He's one of the guys that is expected to visit Arizona in the month of June. Baseball is going to play a big part in his decision. So it's very interesting to see that Arizona's football staff can do everything they can to get him on campus and to make sure that he feels comfortable with the football staff. But it really could depend on what happens with the baseball team and how much progress and how much success they have over these next few weeks when they get into the NCAA tournament. If they make a run at the College World Series, that could end up playing into Robbie Snelling's recruitment and end up making his decision for him. Oregon is in there as well. Texas is another school that was very much involved. It's kind of felt like those three schools are kind of the main programs in contention. Obviously, we know about Texas baseball. Oregon baseball is very successful as well. So it's easy to see kind of how both sports are playing into his recruitment. And Arizona football, when you look at kind of the overall kind of makeup of kind of which schools are involved, Arizona football might be the weak link of that picture. Oregon football, very strong. Texas football has a new coach, but has that kind of tradition as well. So Arizona their football program and their coaching staff has done a good job of selling him on how he could fit in. Don Brown, this defense being a part of what they want to do. But baseball is going to be a big part of that as well. So that he's going to be definitely someone to watch and keep an eye on. There is a chance that if Arizona doesn't host the Super Regional, he might not end up coming out at all. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of how this all plays out. And it will be interesting to see if Arizona does make a Super Regional, if that ends up what makes him, committing at Arizona as a football player. And, just that one thing of Arizona simply making the Super Regional and hosting, Super Regional in one random baseball season ends up, getting them a very strong football player as well. So he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, over the next few weeks.
So, Matt, we watched the quarterback play in the spring game. Shane and I did. We saw Gunnar Cruz outplay Will Plummer significantly, but apparently Plummer had some good practices. But based on what I saw, I think Jordan McLeod is starting sooner than later when it comes to the regular season. Maybe not right away, but maybe by game 2 or 3. Would you agree with that assessment, or is this Gunnar Cruz's job for the long haul?
It's very interesting. I think Jordan McLeod has to feel pretty good about his chances. I don't know if you could have a more even battle at this point. Will Plummer started out the spring and you said, oh, he's going to win the job. He looks the most comfortable. He looks the most sharp. And then he hit a bit of a wall and he just kind of regressed a little bit. Didn't look as sharp, was making too many mistakes. And that's when Gunnar Cruz was able to kind of catch up. And you said, okay, Gunnar Cruz is going to be the guy. You look at him. He fits what, when you think of an NFL pro style system, he kind of fits that in many ways. And so you kind of said, okay, I think Gunnar Cruz is going to be the guy. And then Will Plummer came on really strong at the end and really put together some strong practices. I do think it's very difficult to take anything away from the spring game. That looked very different. As someone who watched all 15 practices, that looked very different than what we saw the 14 other practices, the 14 other days the team was out there. There was a lot of trick plays that they didn't run in practice, and just they were trying not to give up too much to any teams that may be watching their spring game film. So I don't think you could put a lot of merit into what you saw that day. But I do think that it's a very even battle. I think if you look at kind of what played out over the course of the spring, Gunnar Cruz hit a little bit of a wall toward the end and wasn't necessarily as sharp and had his off days as well. I think if you look at all 15 practices, he was the most consistent. If you say who was the more consistent of the two top guys, I think from start to finish, he was more consistent. But in terms of maybe the flash plays and the plays that made you say, oh, that's a really nice play, Will Plummer probably had more of those. There wasn't as much flash with Gunnar Cruz. But going back to your original point, I think Jordan McLeod, who was at spring practice toward the end, I believe he watched the last practice and he was there at the spring game, has to be feeling okay about his chances. I think he's going to come into a situation where he's going to have every opportunity to win the job. And, when you're coming in as a new guy who missed spring ball, that's kind of all you can hope for. His size, I did see him in person, saw him up close. His size is going to be interesting. I want to see him in pads. I just saw him kind of in regular, everyday clothes and little small. I think it's going to surprise some people that he's not, as tall as maybe they think he's going to be. And so a little small, I'm going to be interested to see kind of how that looks when he's in full pads and how different he looks from the rest of the group. But I think that is something to be at least aware of when he makes it out there and is eventually on campus. Maybe it doesn't matter in the end. Maybe he's has that talent, has the experience that those other guys don't have, because he does have that on his side. He started games, he's played, in big time games. And so he does have that experience on his side. But I think it's going to be an interesting battle once the fall arrives. And I think it's going to be kind of a very even battle. And you won't really know who's going to be the starter until very close to the start of the season.
All right, Matt, last question, and thank you as always for joining us. Yesterday, DraftKings came out with their over-under for Arizona football, and the win total over-under, which is 2.5. If I were to give you, let's say, $100, where are you putting that money, on the over or the under?
I think I'm going to go with the over, but just barely. I do think that this is still a 3 or 4 win team. Hate to tell Arizona fans that, but they didn't win any games. They're on a 12-game losing streak. I don't think the talent gap has shrunk all that much. I do think that Jed Fish and the staff have addressed some needs and have raised the bar a little bit. But I still think you're still a few years out from really having a successful football program, under this new staff. They need to get their feet wet. They need to start getting some more talent on board. And maybe the transfer portal becoming so popular is going to allow them to do that quicker. But I think for now, I think they just kind of plugged some holes and didn't necessarily get a ton better across the board. And I do think there are some pieces where you go, that is a more talented player at that position. Isaiah Rutherford is someone that you look at the cornerback spot and you say that based on what he did, he looked like someone who should be going to Notre Dame. He had that kind of makeup, and he came in day one and was really impressive throughout camp. And he's the highest rated recruit on the team. And you look at some of the players, they do have talent. They do have players that will probably eventually be playing on Sundays. But I think overall the talent level is just not where it needs to be to say that they're going to be above 500, be a bowl game type of team once again. I think that's going to take some time. So I was high on this team last year, and I was clearly wrong. I didn't think they were going to go winless even in the 5-game season. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, but I do think that they win a few games. And 2.5, 2.5 games just seems a little bit low to me. I think it's probably closer to the 4 game wins, or 3 wins this season, 3-4 wins for Arizona this year. I have hesitation going beyond that. I think there's going to be some struggles with this team. You're talking about a new staff, a new system. It's a little bit complicated, and there's a lot to the offensive system, a lot to the defensive system. I think it's going to take some time for them to really figure things out, and take a couple years for them to head in the right direction again.
All right. Well, Matt said he feels good about it, so I'm going to go bet my house on this. So if I'm homeless come December, I'm blaming you, Matt. Thank you as always for joining us. You're a great guest. We always learn a lot from you. And check out goazcats.com always for the best info when it comes to recruiting and much more with the Arizona Wildcats. Thanks, Matt, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.